I'm going to explain how to make the custom spring for my 3D printed 10-round Umarex Notos magazines. I use music wire, sometimes called spring tempered wire. The size I'm using is 0.02 inches in diameter. They come in a variety of different sizes. If you use a different size, you may need to use a different length or different diameter to make the custom spring. Comes in a large roll, but I've removed 26 to 27 inches, and this will be enough to make 2 springs. You can see in the description a link to my Cults 3D site where you can download the STL files for my magazine and also this custom mandrel that's used to make this spring. The first thing you need to do with this wire is in one end make a 90-degree bend. So something about like that. This will be used for holding the wire in the mandrel. You're going to have to insert it in a small hole. Small hole is right here. That'll be able to hold the wire as you wind it around this mandrel while keeping it taut. In order to keep it taut, on the other end of the wire, I bend a curve to fit around this bolt. You can put the wire there and hand tighten the nuts on either side. This is just a way to hold the wire and put some tension on it. You could also do this with pliers, but I find this much easier to hold on to while trying to wind the wire around the mandrel. This may be hard to see, but I'm going to attach the wire to the mandrel. Off camera, the other end of this wire, I'm holding it taut, pulling on the wire while I wrap it. You need to keep tension on the wire the whole time it's wrapping. The mandrel here has threads on it. The threads are in reverse direction to normal screws, and that allows it to wind over the top each way. And the threads keep them nicely spaced so you end up with a nice, well-made spring. If I released it now, the spring would relax and whip around. So if you reverse the drill, you can loosen the spring, let it relax. Once it's done relaxing, you can remove it from the mandrel. What you get is a length of spring that's long enough for 2 magazines. So the first thing you'll want to do is you should have this 90-degree inward bend. It's a little bit longer than it needs to be for the magazine. simply try to straighten this a little, make it nice, and you get a 90-degree inward bend. It can't be too long or it won't fit into the space on the magazine. Once you have that roughly 90 degrees inward bent, I use essentially 8 coils of this per spring. So you can count those off. And now I'm going to cut this effectively in line with that 90-degree bend. So the spring that I just cut should have 8 coils. You've got a 90-degree bend toward the middle, and now the other end about in line with that 90-degree bend. We now need to make a bend outward, which I would like to come out. If you have the 90-degree bend, inward bend at the bottom, we want it to come out. If the 90-degree bend is at the 6 o'clock position, the outward bend we would like somewhere around the 3 o'clock position. It can be more or less. I wouldn't want it more than the 12 o'clock position. What that's going to do is allow us to have a bit of preload on the rotor in the magazine while it loads the first or final, depending on which way you look at it, pellet in the magazine. So we essentially try to get a nice 90-degree bend. It's going to be slightly longer than it needs to be, and then we'll clip it off. This can be a little bit longer than the inward bend. And what this does is this outward bend will fit into a slot on the bottom of the rotor. The inward bend will fit into a small hole which is located in this center opposite the pellet probe hole. That's essentially all there is to making this spring. You'll notice this is slightly past the 3 o'clock position. As I mentioned, it can be somewhere around plus or minus that 3 o'clock position, while the inward bend is at the 6 o'clock position.